2011 Hyundai Sonata 2.4 GDI. Gasoline direct injection. Fuel pump goes up top. Timing chains and timing marks. Variable valve timing on the exhaust. Timing mark here. Intake camshaft timing mark here. You also have a line here and a line here that line up, as well as when the chain is in place, they should be lined up. Intake goes up here on the front. Direct injection injectors, 1, 2, 3, 4, go directly into the cylinder. Intake manifold here, where a normal intake manifold would have injectors in the manifold on the top. These are under the manifold and directly into the cylinders. Camshaft position sensor for the intake camshaft. Camshaft position sensor for the exhaust camshaft. Fuel pump, high pressure fuel pump mounting boss, and then the valve cover bolts here and around all of this over here. Spark plugs down the center. And then I'm back here on the front of the engine. We've got balance shaft chain, and then the main chain goes up here on the top. I'm going to talk about the balance shaft chain for a second. I did not pull it off on this engine because all I did was pull the head to replace a burnt valve. Pretty common on these engines. And I was going to show you the timing marks on the balance shaft oil pump chain because it does both jobs. Oil pump bolts directly to the balance shaft assemblies, which are under here. So you got a balance shaft that runs here, balance shaft that runs here, oil pickup into the oil pump drive gear, balance shaft drive gear, balance shaft tensioner, which I didn't pull that off either. I just pulled the guides off so I can show you where the marks are at. On this one, there's a mark behind the chain, right on the tooth of the gear right there, if you can see it. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a dimple right there, which would line up with one of your marks. And because I can't take this gear off, or this gear will only slide so far, I can't take all of that off without removing the balance shaft oil pump assembly and dropping it down, is what the manufacturer's specifications call for. So I'm not going to pull it off because I don't need to. And this chain is actually still in time, but I'm going to show you the timing marks that you'll be looking for. That mark and the keyway line up with where the main cap and the block line up. So there's that line that shows up right there is where that keyway lines up, and that will put piston number 1 at top dead center. On the bottom balance shaft, you've got a dot, and then you also have a mark and a notch, and that's where it lines up at. Once you put the guide over here in place, it's real hard to see that, but that's where that's supposed to line up at. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the guides on the bottom, and then we'll worry about putting the chain on the top. Tensioner guide. And yes, I will go back and tighten these with a torque wrench. You guys don't need to be watching me tighten stuff with a torque wrench. Y'all should all know how to do that. So this one, pull the pin, pushes out. It's going to be a little sloppy right now, but once the oil pressure builds up, you hold it tight. Everything's lined up where it's supposed to be. I said that mark there is still kind of hard to see, but none of that was moved in disassembly process of pulling the head off, so we won't mess with any of that. So now that we see all the front of the motor, all those timing marks, there's, like I said, that dot will line up with one, your orange mark or your yellow mark, and then the other mark will line up with the dot that's up here, which lines up with the keyway. I'm gonna go ahead and put the other main chain gear on. It has a dot right there as well. So now we have a dot here, a dot up here, and a dot up here. This timing chain has a painted link here, a painted link here, and a painted link way down here. So they're obvious what colors they are. They look nothing like the original ones, and it's only on one side of the chain. So if you're reusing your original timing chain, it's pretty easy to put it on the same direction. You never want to put a timing chain on one way and then let it run the opposite direction, because it's not good for the chain, because the chain will stretch and break at that point. So make sure our marks are lined up. Dot and a link. Come across here, a dot and a link. Come down here, our dot and our link. And the chain is installed. Now we have two guides here. We've got one guide that sits on this side, and then we have our guide that goes with our, that didn't go under. There we go. Keep that in place. Get our bolts in there. The upper two bolt holes will slide a little bit. The bottom bolt hole is really tight. It gives it a little bit of adjustment. And then where our tensioner goes on the other side, slides on and actually has a bushing that's built onto the cylinder head. So the bolt looks like this and not like that. This one's got the guide built onto the bolt. This one, the guide is built in the head. So all 6 of your other guide bolts for the main chain and the 3 that are down here on the balance shaft chain all look like this. This bolt has a large washer on it, so when it gets put on, it will sit on the outside of this right here. Now we grab the timing chain tensioner. Uh-oh. Even us professionals make boo-boos every once in a while. The timing chain is stuck behind that. It did not get up and over. There we go. Much better. Now it slides and moves free. This one has a very large hole in it for the dowel. I used a 1/8" punch. Press the tensioner in. Have to get it set just right for the when you push it in. Here, let me show you that real quick. Just in case anybody wants to see that. This one doesn't have it's got a spring in it, but it doesn't have to be pressed with a vise. So it's got the spring inside of here. You also have where oil pressure comes in through this cavity and into here. That pushes this out, pushes against the chain. The guide, so it pulls on the chain. There's a little teeth right here that once it's pushed back in, it's going to lock into. So as long as while the engine's running and this is trying to pull back down on it, it's only going to hit that lock. But you got to get that pushed in. So you got to find the sweet spot and pull that latch out to where you can slide it in. Now it's real easy to squish that spring, but the problem comes in is if you go too far in, you can't get the pin in it, and if you go too far, it's not far enough in. If you come too far out, so you got to find that spot where that very last notch pushes on it, lines up, 1/8" goes in, and she's in. So now we put her on. Get it up here. Tighten it up. Make sure our marks are lined up one more time. Marks lined up. Marks lined up. One down here. A little harder to see, but it's still on the dot. Our 2 marks here are pointing at each other. Pretty darn close. One there, and one there. They're pointing towards each other. Just a smidge off, but that could be a little bit of chain stretch. And we pull the pin. Make sure that the tensioner is seated in there. We're in place. See where all our timing marks are at. They all look nice and pretty. Come back in here and start our crankshaft bolt. Get it on here snug. And just like with any engine, you do any kind of timing on it, like to rotate them over and get these marks lined back up. Make sure what's where. And let's go ahead and count this links between the dots so we know how many links are supposed to be between the dot. We start with that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Colored link to colored link. There's 12 dots, or 12 links between our dots. So when we roll it over, we know that those won't be lined up exactly in the same spot as they are right now. So they'll be somewhere else in the chain, but the keyway will be lined up with the block. These two marks will be lined up. The dots will be up here, but these on the link won't, and we should still have 12 links between our timing marks. So here we go. Okay, that's 180. Marks are down on the bottom. Crankshaft's turned 180 degrees, or 360 degrees. Our cams have turned 180 degrees. Do it one more time. The timing mark should line up. Hey, look what lined up that time. We won't be able to turn back, but our dot here lined up with that one, and then behind it, it's harder to see, but our other painted link lined up with the dot on our rear gear for our balance shaft. That's one of those flukes that just happened to line up. So we get this moved around, get it lined up with our cam, or our main shaft cap. You go back to the top. These two are right in the same spots. These two are in the same spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Dot to dot. As you can see, our marks are not in the same spots. But like I said, you'll have to rotate it over probably 30 or 40 times to get them to line back up exactly. Like these finally lined up down here. But the rest of this is pretty much self-explanatory. You bolt the timing cover, you put silicone on the timing cover, put the timing cover on, flip the motor over, put silicone on the oil pan, bolt it on, flip it back over, put your valve cover on, tighten her all up, go slap her in the car. Piece of cake. Timing is something that most people get frustrated with, whether it's with a timing belt or a timing chain. It's not that hard, guys. You just gotta take a little bit of time and be patient with it. I will see you on the next one.